Hi, so welcome to the Sociology Staffroom. We're really lucky today to talk about a really important topic that personally is really important to me, which is the imposter syndrome. We've got two wonderful guests willing to speak to us today. I should put a bit of background to it. We've got Jon Hamer with us, who, if I get this right, you're the head of Society, Religion and Life. It sounds quite
Uh,
like quite spiritual there.
yeah, religion, society, and life.
Religion society. I've got the wrong way around, but yeah,
That's
that's
all
an
right.
immense title. I was like, wow. I mean, just I think that just the life bit in itself, like the head of life.
Not thought about it that way. Yeah,
And we've got Brandi Robin with us as well, also head of social sciences, but not the head of life, unfortunately, speaking with us today. So first of all, thank you ever so much for coming to speak to us. That's cool. That's cool. So first of all, I want to put a bit of background of how I sort of saw you guys. It's a bit of weird. Like obviously, I was sort of listening to or reading the comments on Facebook on our sort of active social sciences sociology page, and you put some really lovely comments. I think I won't sort of go into detail because obviously for confidentiality and stuff. But there was, someone was talking about imposter syndrome, and they felt that was something they were concerned about, and both put on some really lovely sort of thoughtful comments. And I thought, wow, that's really inspiring, and to have that community of teachers that are willing to put themselves out there and say something. So I want to say thank you for that as well, because I think it was really brave of you to put yourself out there and share your experiences and to give that support. So first of all, let's go straight into thinking about the imposter syndrome and thinking um, about that. First of all, what does that mean to you as obviously as a sociology teacher or as teacher of the social sciences? What does that mean to you, Jon?
well, for me, imposter syndrome is feeling like you don't deserve to have the position you're in, or feeling like basically feeling you're rubbish. You're feeling you're rubbish as a
Mm.
teacher. And I think as sociology has become a lot more popular, so more and more schools are starting to offer it, and there's a demand for teachers to be teaching it. But I don't think that many current teachers that are entering teaching have sociology as a specialism. I mean, I did it for A level, and that's how I ended up teaching at GCSE. We added it onto our religious studies department as well. And so I think there's teachers that are experiencing sociology teaching it, but have not looked at it for many years or have never really looked at it before. I said, so I think some people have fallen into sociology from other subjects. And there's such a wide collection of like studies, names, and technical terms in sociology that I feel teachers feel sometimes overwhelmed if it's not their main subject. All it takes is just one student who's read one study online, and it can throw a teacher completely, and they no longer feel like they are the teacher in the room. It's kind of caught them off guard. They're outside their comfort zone. I also think this has certainly increased a lot during the pandemic years, as there's not been kind of final exams as such to kind of quantify our kind of worth as teachers in exam
Mm.
subjects. So we don't know if we've been doing a good job or not. And there's all these things that even teachers need, someone to say, there, you're doing a good job, to keep us going.
You said some really interesting things, and I know that we had sort of a podcast similar to that where it was about sort of non-specialists. So you've highlighted the fact that we've got a lot of non-specialists coming into the subject, and the fact that maybe we sort of fall into it. And I saw that Brandi was nodding her head there and going, so I would come to sort of find out what your experience there, Brandi, on that is as well. And also you just mentioned that sort of quantifiable element. And myself, I've taught for sociology for 18 years now, but definitely not having it. It was really good. That was really when I sort of smiled. I went, oh yeah, that's a really bad point. I didn't even think of it until you said that. Actually, I personally had never thought of it like that. That as much as we're sort of like, oh, exams. Actually, it's that thing of saying, oh, actually, I can teach and I'm teaching right, and X amount of students got this amount of grades. So it's a really powerful point there. I saw, Brandon, you nodding your head there. So what's your understanding of the imposter syndrome?
Um, do you know what? I think the main reason we have imposter syndrome as teachers is because it's like, I think there's three times that you would experience imposter syndrome in my opinion, as a parent, as a teacher, and as a police officer. Because when we grow
Okay.
up, they are like they're like a separate authority figure to us. So when we now become those authority figures, it's like you're sort of shocked that you are playing that role that you used to see in others. And I think the nail was hit on the head about the specialism, because one thing that just like brings tears to my eyes when I hear teachers say, oh, well, sociology is an easy subject to teach. You know, family, education, we've all done it. Nothing upsets me more than hearing we've all been in a family, we've all gone to school. And then what happens is these non-specialists are thrown into the subject and they're like, oh, wait, I've got a mum and a dad, but I don't understand social action theory. Or, yeah, I've got a mum, I grew up with siblings, but guess what? I don't understand the impact of globalization, for example, on the family. So I think it's a combination of both. One, we're already in a role that's naturally going to bring on imposter syndrome, but also combined with a subject that has this like reputation for being an easy subject, we end up with so many non-specialists. I've seen so many non-specialists over the years. I've been head of sociology in many different places, and it's always, oh, she teaches a bit of this, she'll be fine doing this. And I think exactly what you said, for in sociology we have like different textbooks, and you will be teaching from one textbook your whole career, open another textbook, and you're like, who is that? Never taught them, never heard of this approach. And it can get really overwhelming, because one thing that people don't realize about sociology is how heavy the content is. So yeah, it might be easier to grasp, but the content is heavy. And I think that's where the imposter syndrome comes from, because you can't believe that you have all of this responsibility. And I feel like I still get it all the time. And you feel like, am I actually doing a good job, or do I just get by day to day? And the school that I've been there for, this is my 5th academic year. And where I joined, I've never taken kids through 2 years and they've done an exam because of COVID. And you think exactly what you were saying. Oh, how do I know that I'm doing a good job? And I think this year the pressure is on, because we're all so worried. Oh my God, if we tank our results, is that a reflection of whether or not we're a good or a bad teacher, I guess. So definitely the non-specialism is definitely a reason why teachers are feeling that way.
So yeah, you said like the non-specialist, and obviously, again, another thing I hadn't even thought of, but this is like a really enlightening conversation as well. Like, you know, and I suppose it's true. Like, it's that feeling of like, oh my goodness, I've got a position of responsibility. Like, I'm actually adulting here. Like, I'm not, you know, like, you know, when you're a kid, this is what reminds me of. That's why I was smiling. Like, you know, when you're a kid and you're like playing. Maybe it was just me. I was playing like these games, but obviously, I played teacher. That's what I did. And I set homework out for my brothers who didn't want to do it. But the point is, like, you're playing a game, it's a role, and then all of a sudden you're performing that role. And it's like, likewise, like you said, when you played mummies or daddies when you were a child, and then it's actually you've got a baby and you're trying to do that. So it's like, that's obviously a sort of normal feeling because of that role. And then obviously you said about the non-specialist element, and I know there's been a lot of talk around that. In thinking about it and sort of turning it on the head, I mean, I've been reading sort of research around this, and I don't think it's exclusive to just one thing, but there's like, I was looking at my data here, but like 44% apparently of teachers are thinking of leaving state education in the next 5 years. Now, they're saying, obviously, the research, I think it's from the NEU, is saying that it's obviously teacher workload and sort of hours and et cetera, et cetera. But I was always wondering, I wonder how much that's being contributed by that feeling of, okay, I've got all this work to do, but if I'm feeling I'm going to be an imposter in doing this, then that makes it even doubly hard, doesn't it? So I was thinking to myself, like, you know, how do we manage this? You know, like, obviously, I suppose there's two strands. It's how do we manage this as an individual, and how do we manage this in sort of your roles as head of department? So if I come to you, Jon, first, obviously you're head of the department, and obviously a sociology teacher. I suppose there's two strands from that. So how do we manage this? Like, let's start with ourselves, I suppose. How do we, like, that Sunday night feeling, you know, that feeling either on a Sunday night or the beginning of a new term, and that feeling, I can't do this. How can we do it? Because I know you wrote some really lovely comments, and I was like, oh my God, that's really lovely. Like, that was really good. Like, yeah, that's it, how I would approach it.
Well, for me, I think it's important to acknowledge that everyone experiences imposter syndrome in some way at some point, and also you can get it multiple times. You might find it comes in cycles during the year. You may find, like, during the summer months when you're not, you know, teaching, you suddenly think, am I able to teach anymore? Or it could be, you know, in winter time when it's dark and there's mocks and things like that going on. So for me personally, for me to overcome it, one of the biggest messages I had kind of with myself was that not to be a perfectionist. That sometimes, this is something that my mentor taught me, what was 15, 16 years ago. Sometimes 80% is good enough. Sometimes 60% is good enough. Sometimes to survive, it is a textbook based lesson. And you say to them, look, this is what we're doing today. And it's just to survive. I've had colleagues that have tried to be the perfect teacher and have been, staying up till like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I have done that on occasions in the past, but you then pay for it and the students then pay for it. So I think to protect ourselves physically and mentally, sometimes we just have to accept, look, this lesson is going to be good enough for now.
That's so true. That's so true because, I think I said this like I've to people that I've mentored in the past. A teacher's job is never done. Particularly like something like a subject like sociology, where there's more research coming out, there's more to read. There's not like a sort of deadline. That actually, it's knowing that you can't be perfect. I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think the second thing the first thing you said was the idea of, this comes in ebbs and flows and everyone feels it. It's not something that goes away. You don't get to pass in your ECT year and all of a sudden you're now, a good or outstanding teacher. Nor is it if you have a judgment from Ofsted, like saying that you are outside, although they don't tell you anymore, that it's something that may happen and that's okay, that's normal. So coming to you, Brandi, I mean, is there anything from an individual point of view that's something you could add to, or is there, as Jon said it all there?
No, I agree with everything that Jon said about just acknowledging that like not everything can be perfect. I am definitely at a point I just had a baby, so sometimes I just think I've done my best. Like my school were like, we need all of the schemes of learning done. I just now have come back as head of sociology and criminology. So over the summer, I spent ages, I worked really hard, the education, the methods, and then I realised I still had some little bits to do on theory and methods. I just didn't send it over because I just thought, I've done the rest, I've done my best. And I think that with imposter syndrome in sociology, because I help a lot of teachers mostly like on WhatsApp, they'll just WhatsApp me saying, can you explain this? Can you help me with this? And like, these things can only come with experience. Like I'm in like my 8th year of teaching A-level sociology and I did marking this year, and there are things that I learned this year that I had absolutely no idea about. Things that I just think, if I knew this all these years, maybe my teaching would have been a little bit different. Hope none of my students hear that. But it's like, I always tell when I work with NQTs, just relax. As it's so much easier said than done, but every year that goes on, you'll get better and better and better and better. And you can't rush experience. And that's why whenever they make a mistake, it's experience. My sister's a teacher, and one thing she always says is, we're only as good as our last lesson. So every lesson we're getting better, we're learning. Oh, I tried that didn't work. Just like the children, we're always learning, evaluating, getting better. So I always just try to tell, especially NQTs, yes, it can seem difficult right now. You may seem like this is not for you right now. But as time goes on, the more comfortable you are, you won't be up till 1 a.m. like you were saying, doing lesson plans, because you're just pulling out your resources that you've already made. You won't be stressing about how you're teaching this, and this, but it comes with time. It can't be rushed. That's what I try to give them reassurance of.
Yeah, that reassurance is so powerful. And sort of crossing over to sort of the other point, which is how can heads of department help, And like you said, it's like this idea that it's something that can't be rushed. And like you said, like staying up, the sort of part of the imposter feeling is, oh, I've got to stay up to 1 o'clock to have these perfect resources. But like you said, the following year, you've just got to tweak them. And actually, like referencing your sister, who's not here, so giving a shout out to your sister, is the idea that, we're good as our last lesson, which could create like anxiety for some teachers, but actually it's that idea of knowing that we're always evolving, we're always improving, and actually that's not a bad thing. And also I think going back to what Jon said, that season of time is knowing that sometimes we've just got to do things that are like, you might be feeling really run down, and it's not like every lesson you're going to give out a textbook. Maybe that for one lesson, that's okay, because you know in yourself you're doing it for a reason, and it's about protecting yourself as well, so that you're okay to come in on the following week and you're not off sick for 10 days or something like that. So the whole range of points you pointed out. So come back to the head of department element. I know that Brandi's just spoken about that there. Jon, obviously you're a head of department as well. So what things do you put into place to sort of support your either ECTs or your experienced members of staff? As you said, experienced members of staff can feel like this as well.
I personally make quite a lot of use of the notes bit in PowerPoints. So when I create resources and things, I often put things in the notes in a kind of, based on my own experience, you know, you could ask them this, you might be able to do this, you can do this if there's time, so that they don't feel like, well, hopefully they don't feel like they are alone in front of a class, you know, and kind of out on a limb, not knowing what they're doing. So they've got hopefully stuff there. I make resources, but I'm not precious over them. I'm happy for anyone to adapt them and change them. But you know, as long as the lesson objective is fulfilled. But I have made resources so that non-specialists can teach using using the materials that we make.
So yeah, sort of sharing, I suppose, best practice ideas of supplementary questions, and then obviously, like you said, the idea of not being willing to share your resources, not being precious about them, sort of collaborative working. Thinking about that, something that both of you have mentioned sort of aligns in with that, and I think something you both mentioned on two separate occasions was the idea of sometimes teachers open up a textbook and they go to themselves, oh my goodness, I've never heard of that name before, that study before. How do we change our outlook on that then? Because obviously that can throw some teachers and add to that imposter syndrome. I can't be, you know, I've been teaching for X amount of years, but I've never heard of X, Y, and Z. Obviously, everyone knows sort of classic names, and I know, Jon, you've got a brilliant T-shirt there as well, sort of to highlight. Obviously, it's Carl so those people that can't see the T-shirt, but you know those classics you'll know. But you know, how can we get our head around these ideas? That okay, yes, you might see a textbook and you might have a name that you don't know. You know, how can we sort of look at that maybe differently? Brandi?
I hate to give a practical response, but AQA have a document with the things that need to be covered, and you will find that there's lots of additional things here and there. And I always say to my team, look, anything that's not on this document is a bonus. So I get it a lot on WhatsApp. Somebody will message me and be like, I've never heard of this sociologist. Do I need to teach it? And they're like really panicked. And it's literally the same thing that I say to my students as well. Like when we look at things like essays, right? You're never going to write an essay on functionalism and need to know 8 different functionalists. So like I'll have a student come to me at the end of the lesson. She's crying. Oh my goodness, the cognitive functions of religion. I've got no idea. I don't understand it. And I sort of whisper in her ear, like, can I be honest with you? Don't worry about it. Delete it from your revision. I mean, I don't want any teachers to be like taking notes on this. Like, oh, okay, I'll do that as well. Because it's not the best practice. But like, there's so much content that as long as you're covering the basics, you don't need to get so overwhelmed with the additionals. And I always say to my staff, like, imagine if you had a textbook that only had this stuff in it, nobody would buy it. They have to put these additional materials in it. So I'd love to give like a more like deep holistic response about how we can overcome that overwhelming feeling. But my best advice is search the internet. That is a really good way of knowing, oh, okay, never heard of this person. And as I'm sure you see in our Facebook group, we get it all the time. Oh, do I need to teach this? You know, ethnomethodology, phenomenology. Every single year that comes up. It's one of the hardest concepts to teach in sociology. It's one of the hardest concepts to grasp. And every single year teachers are asking, do we need to teach it? So I think indicative content is really useful, which is what, as you were saying, what we can do as heads of department. That's what I like to do for my team. Exact same thing that you were saying, Jon, in the sense of I've got my scheme of learning that's got synoptic links, because that's the only thing that a non-specialist may not be able to grasp. So I would say really good opportunity to link to this. And at the start of every year I say, it sounds a bit rude, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to say it like that, but I'll be like, must link to secularization. Secularization links to everything. Must discuss this. And then on the other side, I'll just have, this is what must be covered. Anything else, great, it's a bonus. But I think that's the best way to support non-specialists. Synoptic links, ways to challenge students, ways to expand, and then what is the minimum content that needs to be taught. And when you've got that clear direction, it will essentially stop you from going so overboard and so overwhelmed. You know, teachers will be like, oh, I spent 3 weeks on this topic, and you're just like, you don't need to spend that long, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good valid point, isn't it? Because I think actually if you sort of start from that standpoint, is that actually it doesn't come overwhelming anything additional, then you start to look at it in a clearer head and a more analytical head and willing to take on more stuff. But it's almost like, I'm thinking of another analogy, I'm sort of bringing it to food, maybe because it's just the time of the day that we're recording, but it's like if you go to a buffet, right? And as much as I love a buffet, I do love my food, it can feel a bit overwhelming to put it all on your plate. You're like, oh, I'm going to put everything on. And you're like, oh, no, I don't want any of it. And then you get to your table and you just don't fancy any of it. Whereas actually, it's just taking a little bit and thinking, right, I'll just focus on that. And then I can go up for more and go up for seconds. It's like, it's that idea of little bits of like chunking, like the advice you give the students. That's okay. Someone's excited. Someone wants to talk about sociology, I think.
Well, I do. We do Educast GCSE, and so it's actually quite good to hear that Brandi's having the same thing with AQA A level. That we have what we're told to teach, and then there was an examiner approved textbook that came out. So when we first started the course, we were teaching using that, to make sure that we covered everything. That helped me when I first started, was making sure that I covered everything that was in there. Then I knew, my job was done. Hooray. Then a revision guide was released that was also examiner approved, and it was full of loads of stuff that wasn't in the textbook, and it wasn't in the stuff on the website, and that made me start panicking, and made me going, oh my word, have I done my kids a disservice by not teaching them this? I don't know this. I don't think anyone knows this, so there was a real kind of concern there, but I had to kind of accept, just like Brandi said, that there's so much stuff and that we will always be learning. And I kind of just turned it on its head when kids were presenting me with stuff in class, so I had some real kind of very able students that were, reading above and beyond what we were doing. They were looking online, and of course there's a lot of stuff online is A-level run GCSE for sociology. So they were reading, beyond what I was teaching. And they were asking me questions, and so I thought, well, I've got a couple of options here. I can either go, I've never heard of that, and be honest with them, and so I kind of just found a middle ground, to kind of keep the power, keep the status, by kind of going, now I have heard something about this before. Bear with me. I always get this bit a bit wrong, and then then I gives me some time to quickly look up what it is they're talking about, and then we can learn about it together. And I just look at it that if it's something I don't know, then I find it out. I'm investing in myself, investing in my own CPD still.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you said there as well that you're always evolving, you're always learning. It actually could act as a little bit of role modelling, I think, sometimes for students, and I think always, me personally, I always sell it to the students that sociology is always growing and evolving as a subject. There's always research, and that's what's exciting about it. So unless you're sort of on top of every bit of research, you're not going to be able to keep abreast of it all the time, and you don't want to be, because you want to be learning. You're not going to know everything, and actually that's some real good role modelling there as well. I'm sorry, Brandi, I could see you wanted to say something.
No, I was just saying, that's a good one. I get the same. Just yesterday, I had a lesson, an introduction to year 12, and I was saying to the students just to research the basics of Marxism, feminism, functionalism. I gave them a list of websites, and I told them, do not go on any university level website, because my degree is not in sociology, as my students are always shocked to find out. I did a teaching degree. I did sociology A level, but I've got lots of sociology within my degree. And, students will make notes on these concepts and they read it out in class, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay. Not necessarily from AQA or on Instagram, because I run an Instagram page. I always have to just clarify, because staff are always like, what do you mean you've got kids messaging you on Instagram? But on Instagram, I've probably once a month, twice a month, a student will message me with a question, but it's uni based. And I'm always just like, I have absolutely no idea. Like, literally never even heard of what you're talking about.
Maybe you
So
should
how
look at
then
it that
could
you've
okay.
inspired. So maybe you should look at it more that you've inspired their, their individual independent learning.
Right.
You're a facilitator more than a teacher.
I'll take that.
There you go.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, John. I was actually going to say that. I said, how can we turn this potential imposter syndrome into something positive, sort of to end on this, really? You know, how can we turn it into something? Because obviously we could turn it into a net like that half glass empty, half glass full idea and going, well, actually, I don't know this. Or as John just said, we've inspired and we're a facilitator of learning, and it's okay not to have everything. And actually, if the students are going off and looking at university websites and like recent research, actually they're taking ownership of their own learning, and actually you're inspiring them, as John said. So is there any other positives? I mean, we could always look at it as, oh, it's terrible, but just a final thought, how can we sort of walk away and go, actually, you know, this imposter syndrome we talk about, this sort of feeling of like, oh, I can't do this. How can this be just quickly turned into a positive potentially? Final comment from John and then from Brandi, if possible, please.
For me, I think it's acknowledging that you have imposter syndrome, or acknowledging how you're feeling. If you can verbalize that to someone, if you can find someone, not necessarily at school, doesn't have to be at school, but finding someone that you're able to talk to about how you're feeling, I think is half the battle. And then celebrating any victories that you do have, any cards that you get from kids, any things where kids leave going, oh my word, I don't know, are the school trying to train us just for a world of work? You're like, brilliant, we've got through to you. It's those little kind of things, and for me, focusing on those rather than any mistakes that you will inevitably make. I have a quote above my door. I've got two. One says, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. The other one says, if you learn from your mistakes, they're no longer mistakes but lessons. So encouraging, if you do make a mistake, as long as you learn from it, great, it's a lesson. I try using that excuse with my wife quite a lot and say I make no mistakes, but she also claims I don't learn anything from them either. So yeah.
I tell what you're like, everyone. I'd love to be. I feel like I could be in your sociology lesson now. So like, oh yeah, this is so true. I feel really inspired. Brandi, any sort of final comments on how we can turn this into a positive?
Yeah, I agree with everything you were saying about it all being a learning curve and speaking to other people, and you realise that other people who have got 10 years on you still feel the same. You'll look at excellent, outstanding teachers who still feel the same. And also, I just think it's about just never forgetting, because I think one thing that teachers forget, that teaching is a skill, and anyone who does a skill is always going to look back at their work and be like, wow, that was rubbish. And then in 5 years, you might think today I could think I'm the greatest sociology teacher and feel really confident. And in 5 years, you're going to look back again and be like, oh God, I can't believe I used to do that. And I just think it's about acknowledging that. I'm not saying we should compare ourselves to well, yes, we should. If you look at anyone who does a skill or a craft, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like singers, for example, and you listen to I always tell my students about this, there's like a video of Ed Sheeran on YouTube singing like terribly out of tune. It's terrible. In sociology, we always talk about people that failed at first. A skill is something that grows all the time, and we are constantly growing. And I just think that's what's important, and seeing anything that goes wrong as a learning curve and something that we want to adapt on. And just like what you were saying, for me, I always say, if one student you've made a difference for, if one student comes out happier than when they left, then we've made a difference. If all the kids in the class hate you, it's not going to affect their education because they hate you. But if one child is like, wow, you've inspired me to do A, B, or C, you don't have to know the whole textbook off by heart to inspire a student, because it's not only about your knowledge or your pedagogy skills or what number rating you get from your line manager, because those things bring us down, right? But they're literally one snapshot in how hard we work. And I think one thing that I would leave on is that if you've got imposter syndrome, you're probably a good teacher in the first place. Somebody once told me that about being a parent. If you're worried about whether or not you're being a good parent, only good parents worry about that. And only good teachers worry about whether they're being a good teacher. You never hear a rubbish teacher that never stays behind, never comes in early, never does anything, go, oh God, I wonder if I'm working hard enough. So I think that's really important. For anyone who's listening to this thinking they've got imposter syndrome, you're already doing a great job by being worried that you're not doing a good job.
Oh, some lovely bits of advice. So true, so true, so true. Learn from your mistakes, and yeah, I think it's a healthy, managed. Obviously, it's impacting on people's life. That's different, but obviously, a healthy small amount of worrying is actually a sign of being a good teacher, because it shows you're caring, you're being reflective. Thank you for both your times. I appreciate that you're both really busy. Obviously, children, work, first beginning of term. But I've really enjoyed this conversation. Lots to think about there, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.